The British Empire ran on tea. By the morning of June 3, 1839, it had proved it would go to war to keep drinking it. At the mudflats of Humen, 20 miles south of Guangzhou, Commissioner Lin Zexu's workers were opening chests, British chests, more than 20,000 of them, each containing roughly 60 pounds of raw Bengal opium. They mixed the opium with salt and lime, then sluiced the paste into the Pearl River. The operation took 23 days, more than 1,000 tons of contraband, dissolved and gone. 9 months later, Britain sent its navy. But the story does not start with the opium. It starts with a cup of tea, a problem Britain, at the peak of its commercial reach, could not solve by honest trade, and a decision that would leave tens of millions of people addicted to a drug they did not choose. There is a document at the center of this story that changed nothing. Commissioner Lin Zexu, the imperial official who ordered that destruction at Humen, wrote a letter. He addressed it to the Queen of England herself. He asked her, plainly, to stop. He named specific harms. He made a legal argument. That letter never reached her. What reached her instead was a request from her Foreign Secretary for authorization to begin what history would call the First Opium War. That letter, and what was done with it instead, is where this story lands. 60 years before Lin Zexu mixed that first chest of opium with lime, the tea trade between Britain and China looked different. It looked, on paper, like commerce. Britain had goods it wanted to sell: wool, clocks, scientific instruments. China had things Britain wanted: tea, silk, and porcelain. But the exchange was not balanced. China had no particular use for British wool. What Chinese merchants would accept, and only what they would accept, was silver, hard currency, physical coin, not goods. So Britain paid in silver. Year after year, shipment after shipment, silver left London and arrived in Canton. In 1710, British tea imports stood at around 300,000 pounds per year. By the 1790s, that figure had crossed 20 million pounds, according to records from the East India Company's own chartered trade logs. The customs duties collected on tea were, by that point, funding a significant portion of the British state's annual revenue. Tea was no longer a luxury, it was a dependency, and the dependency ran one way. The silver kept flowing east, and none of it came back. The East India Company, which held the monopoly on British trade with China, was bleeding silver at a rate that its directors described in internal memoranda as unsustainable. The Qing court had set the terms. Foreign trade happened only in Canton, at a designated compound called the 13 Factories, a strip of warehouses and counting houses along the Pearl River waterfront. Foreign merchants could not travel inland. They could not negotiate directly with government officials. They conducted business through licensed Chinese intermediaries called Hong merchants, and they paid in silver. By 1800, the outflow had been running for decades. The company had spent, by its own treasury records, tens of millions of pounds in silver flowing east over the course of the 18th century. Historian Xin Pao Chang, in his 1964 work, Commissioner Lin and the Opium War, documents the calculation that followed inside company boardrooms. Britain needed something China would buy, something that could move through existing commercial networks at the edge of the Canton system without requiring the Qing court's permission, something that generated its own demand. The answer was already growing in Bengal. Britain had controlled opium production in Bengal since the 1760s. The East India Company held a monopoly on it. Opium had been used medicinally across Asia for centuries, and small amounts mixed with tobacco had been smoked in China for generations. The market was already there. Company directors authorized a structured expansion of the Bengal opium trade through the 1780s and 1790s. Opium poppies grew in the Patna and Benares districts. The raw paste was processed into balls, wrapped in poppy leaf petals, packed into wooden chests, and auctioned at Calcutta. Private merchants, sometimes called country traders, bought the chests and ran them east to the Chinese coast. They transferred the cargo onto fast, shallow draft vessels anchored just outside Chinese territorial waters, beyond the reach of Qing customs officials. Chinese dealers came out by sampan to collect, and the opium moved inland through networks that had existed for decades. The company kept its own name out of the transaction. Its servants made the profit. The arrangement seemed manageable at first. It was not. In 1820, approximately 4,000 chests of Bengal opium entered China. By 1838, records reviewed by the British Parliamentary Select Committee on the Trade with China put the annual figure at roughly 40,000 chests, a tenfold increase in less than 2 decades. And the direction of the silver had reversed. It was leaving China now, flowing toward British trading houses and the company treasury. 20,000 chests, each chest weighing roughly 60 pounds. More than 1,000 tons of opium per year, flooding into a country of 300 million people who had no vote in the transaction. By the mid-1830s, the Qing Treasury's provincial officials were reporting a new problem. Regions that had once remitted their taxes in silver were requesting permission to pay in copper instead. The silver had gone to buy opium. Everything was in place for the trade to expand without limit. The company had the poppy fields, the country traders had the ships, the Chinese dealers had the networks. Nobody in the Canton trade system could hear the clock that was already ticking. The Daoguang Emperor had been watching the numbers for years. His court officials had debated the question in formal memorials. Some argued for legalization and taxation. Others argued for suppression. Among the most forceful voices for suppression was a mandarin named Lin Zexu, then serving as Governor-General of Hunan and Hubei. Lin had already run a local crackdown in Hunan. He had submitted detailed memorials to the throne documenting what he found. Officials caught smoking at their desks, soldiers whose hands shook on parade, merchants who had sold their household silver to fund the next pipe. He documented names, ranks, and outcomes in the bureaucratic language that imperial administration required. The emperor read those memorials. In December 1838, he appointed Lin Zexu as Imperial High Commissioner for the suppression of opium in Guangdong Province. The mandate was unambiguous. Go to Canton, end the trade. Lin Zexu arrived in Guangzhou in January 1839. But nobody inside the Canton foreign factories, and few outside them, believed the crackdown would hold. Foreign merchants had seen Chinese officials come and go. The trade had survived every previous attempt to suppress it. The Hong merchants had survived every previous attempt. The bribe networks had survived. What comes next is the part that, looking back, still does not make sense to the people who ran the Canton trade. What Lin Zexu found when he arrived was a system embedded in every layer of coastal society. The customs officials at the Pearl River estuary were on the payroll of the Hong merchants. The Hong merchants were intermediaries for the foreign trading houses. The foreign houses bought from the country traders. The country traders bought from the company auction in Calcutta. Everyone in the chain was making money. Everyone in the chain knew what was moving. Lin moved fast. He arrested opium dealers. He shut down smoking dens in Guangzhou. He demanded that Chinese opium users register for treatment, with officials assigned to monitor their recovery. Then he turned to the foreign merchants in the Canton factories and issued a formal demand. Surrender every chest of opium currently held in British warehouses and aboard British ships in the harbor. The foreign merchants refused. Lin Zexu confined them to the Canton factories. He cut off their food supply and removed their Chinese servants. He posted soldiers at the factory gates. He waited. Charles Elliot, the British trade superintendent at Canton, eventually ordered British merchants to comply with the surrender. He also promised them compensation from the British government, a promise he had no official authority to make, but made anyway, because it was the only way to end the confinement. The total surrendered was 20,291 chests. 20,291. Lin had them transported to the mudflats at Humen and destroyed over 23 days. Before the destruction was complete, Lin Zexu had already sent the letter. The letter was composed in early 1839 and published in the Chinese Repository, English-language periodical printed in Canton, in May 1839. The full text survives. You can read it now. Lin Zexu wrote in the language of imperial correspondence, formal and precise. The argument was simple. He noted that opium was prohibited within Britain itself. He drew the logical inference from that fact. He wrote, in a passage translated and cited in Julia Lovell's The Opium War, published in 2011, "If the opium trade is not forbidden in your nation, then I, the Commissioner, have truly misjudged the situation, and this letter may be disregarded. If it is indeed forbidden, then I beseech your Majesty to examine the good faith of your merchants who bring it here." He named the human cost in plain administrative language. Families destroyed, treasury revenues in silver going to pay for contraband, government officials whose corruption could be traced directly to the trade, soldiers rendered unfit for service. He asked the Queen to instruct her merchants to stop. He was asking a head of state to apply to her own subjects the same standards she applied to her own country. That was the argument. It was legally coherent. It was morally coherent. The letter never reached Victoria. It reached Charles Eliot, who did not forward it through diplomatic channels. It also reached William Jardine, who read it, understood what it meant for the future of the trade, and was already boarding a ship for London. Jardine had a very different message to deliver, but here's the detail that everyone in Canton missed at the time. While Lin Zexu was conducting what he believed to be a successful suppression campaign, and while Eliot was managing the surrender of the opium stocks and writing uncomfortable dispatches back to London, William Jardine was not panicking. He was preparing. William Jardine was a Scottish surgeon who had turned ship's doctor, then opium merchant. He was co-founder of the trading house then known as Jardine, Matheson and Company. He had built his personal fortune on the Bengal to China opium run and knew the trade routes, the smuggling networks, and the Chinese coastal geography better than almost any other British merchant alive. He sailed for London in the autumn of 1839 and secured meetings with Lord Palmerston, the British Foreign Secretary. What followed, as Julia Lovell documents in detail, was a briefing that shaped the coming war more directly than any military planning. Jardine handed Palmerston charts of Chinese coastal fortifications, drawn from years of personal observation. He provided estimates of the naval force required to compel the Qing court to accept British terms. He prepared a list of specific demands Britain should make: the opening of additional treaty ports, a fixed customs tariff, an indemnity to cover the confiscated opium, and the right to conduct trade on British terms rather than Chinese ones. Palmerston's subsequent instructions to the naval commanders followed Jardine's briefing almost word for word. You would think someone in Parliament would have raised an objection. Some did. William Ewart Gladstone rose in the House of Commons on April 7, 1840, and said, "A war more unjust in its origin, a war more calculated in its progress to cover this country with permanent disgrace, I do not know and I have not read of." The government ignored him. The fleet had already sailed. If you want to understand more of history's darkest chapters, the ones buried inside the goods you use every day, subscribe and keep watching. Enter the Daoguang Emperor. While Jardine was briefing Palmerston in London, and British warships were assembling off the Chinese coast, the Emperor was receiving dispatches in Beijing from Commissioner Lin Zexu. The dispatches described victories. They described the foreign merchants humbled, the opium stocks surrendered and destroyed, the coastal trade under control. They did not describe what was actually happening. Lin Zexu had inflated his reports to the throne. He understood what the consequences of admitting defeat would mean for him personally, and he understood that the emperor, 1,000 miles inland in the Forbidden City, had no independent way to verify conditions on the coast. So the reports described the situation as manageable. They were not manageable. Iron-hulled British paddle steamers, the Nemesis among them, had already demonstrated in Pearl River engagements that no shore battery the Qing possessed could reliably damage them. Chinese coastal artillery was designed to sink wooden ships. The Nemesis was iron. The shells struck and fell away. The ship kept moving. The gap between the Emperor's understanding and the military reality was not going to survive contact with the British fleet. The First Opium War moved fast. British forces took the island of Zhoushan off the coast of Zhejiang in July 1840 in under 9 hours. They blockaded Canton. They threatened Shanghai. By 1842, they had sailed more than 200 miles up the Yangtze River and reached Nanjing, threatening to cut the Grand Canal that supplied the imperial capital. Chinese military casualties in the First Opium War are estimated at roughly 18,000 to 20,000 killed, according to Julia Lovell's accounting in The Opium War. British military casualties were fewer than 100 killed in combat, according to British War Office records of the period. That asymmetry was not the result of courage on one side and cowardice on the other. It was the result of iron-hulled ships and Congreve rockets against coastal forts armed with cannon that had not been meaningfully upgraded in generations. British forces had the advantage of industrialized warfare. The Qing forces had valor and matchlock muskets. Everything the Qing court had built to manage the foreign trade relationship, the Canton system, the Hong merchants, the restricted factory compound, the silver-only payments, all of it was about to be replaced by something else entirely. The Treaty of Nanking was signed on August 29, 1842, aboard a British warship anchored on the Yangtze. China agreed to open 5 ports to British trade: Guangzhou, Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai. China ceded the island of Hong Kong to Britain in perpetuity. China paid an indemnity of 21 million silver dollars. 6 million went to compensate British merchants for the opium Lin Zexu had destroyed. 3 million settled debts owed to British Hong merchants, and 12 million covered the costs of the war Britain had launched to collect the compensation. China was made to pay for the opium that had been poisoning its own people. The indemnity was itemized and paid in full. Commissioner Lin Zexu was dismissed from his post in 1840, shortly after the British fleet demonstrated what his reports had concealed. The emperor needed someone to absorb the consequences of the defeat. Lin was exiled to Ili, in the far northwest of the empire, near what is now the border between China and Kazakhstan. He traveled overland. He spent his years of exile writing poetry, mapping the region he had been banished to, and compiling geographical notes on the territory that might one day be of use to the empire that had sent him there. The man who had tried to stop the trade was writing surveys in a remote province. The trade continued, but this was not just about Britain anymore. France had been watching. Russia had been watching. Both wanted the same treaty rights Britain had extracted. And within a decade, it became clear that the concessions extracted at Nanking had not satisfied the ambitions of the parties who now held those rights. In 1856, a Hong Kong registered vessel called the Arrow was boarded by Chinese customs officers searching for a suspected pirate. The British consul in Canton, Harry Parkes, argued the vessel had been flying a British flag at the moment of boarding, which, if true, would have made the boarding a violation of treaty rights. The flag had in fact been lowered before the boarding took place. Parkes pressed the complaint regardless. Lord Palmerston, now Prime Minister, chose to escalate it. The Second Opium War followed, fought jointly by Britain and France. Combined forces captured Canton in December 1857. They moved north. In October 1860, British and French troops burned the old summer palace, the Yuan Ming Yuan, outside Beijing. The complex of palaces and gardens had been built and expanded over 150 years. It contained irreplaceable manuscripts, artworks, bronze astronomical instruments, and collections assembled by emperors across generations. The burning took 2 days. British General James Hope Grant noted that the destruction was ordered specifically as a message to the emperor. The Xianfeng emperor had already fled the capital. The Convention of Peking, signed in October 1860, opened additional ports, expanded access for Christian missionaries, ceded the Kowloon Peninsula to Britain, and, most significantly, legalized the import of opium into China. The thing Commissioner Lin Zexu had surrendered his career and his freedom to stop became a treaty obligation written into Chinese law at British insistence. Most people never heard what that legalization meant at ground level. By the 1880s, estimates of the number of opium addicts in China range from 10 million to 20 million people. Those figures are contested, and scholars, including Frank de Cutter, Lars Lahmann, and Zhou Shun in their 2004 work, Narcotic Culture, A History of Drugs in China, note the difficulty of accurate enumeration, given the absence of reliable census data and the political incentives both sides had to inflate or minimize the numbers. Kathleen Lodwick, in Crusaders Against Opium, 1996, surveys the range of contemporary estimates and draws similar conclusions. The precise figure is unknowable, but the scale of the crisis is not in serious dispute. These were not abstract numbers. They were farmers in Yunnan province who could not plant a field because they had pawned their seed grain to buy another day of supply. They were local officials in Fujian whose court hearings ran hours late because the presiding magistrate could not function without his morning dose. They were soldiers along the frontier whose commanding officers sent reports to Beijing stating that their men were unfit for field duty. Their families, their villages, their debts, their deaths went unrecorded in the documents that mattered most to the people conducting the trade. The British trade manifests recorded cargo, chests, weights, auction prices per lot at Calcutta, profit margins per shipment, the names and accounts of the trading houses that ran the transactions. The accounting was meticulous. The people who consumed the contents of those chests were not part of the accounting. We know something about them from Lin Zexu's memorials to the Daoguang Emperor, written during his time as Governor General and as Imperial Commissioner. He described, in administrative language, what he personally observed in Guangzhou. Servants in wealthy households who stole silver to buy their supply, their thefts documented when they were caught. Merchants from Guangdong and Fujian whose addiction was described with the precision of court testimony by the officials who interrogated them. Those records exist in Chinese language archives. The individual names within them appear rarely in the English language histories of the Opium Wars. You would think that gap would have been noticed at the time by the people in Parliament who debated the trade's continuation through the 1840s, 1850s, and 1860s. Some of them did notice it. The government continued the trade anyway. The record preserves the commerce. It does not preserve the people. That was convenient for the people running the commerce. The formal opium trade was not abolished until the Anglo-Chinese Agreement of 1907, which set out a 10-year reduction plan. The trade was to be halved, then halved again, then ended. The official trade ceased by the early 1910s. The trade that had begun as a solution to a tea deficit ran for more than a century after Lin Zexu's workers first mixed those chests with lime at Humen. Commissioner Lin Zexu spent his years of exile in Ili writing. He compiled geographical surveys. He composed poems about the landscape of the Northwest. When a new military crisis arose in the mid-1840s, the government recalled him from exile. He was appointed imperial commissioner to a campaign in the south. He died of illness in Chaozhou in 1850, on his way to take up that command. He did not reach it. The letter he had written to the Queen of England in 1839 contained a question that was never answered. He had asked whether any sovereign could call herself righteous while her merchants profited from the destruction of another people. He framed it as a legal argument because that was the language his position required, and because he believed that a sovereign who had prohibited the same drug within her own borders had no principled ground on which to export it to others. The argument was sound. It was not answered. Britain prohibited the opium trade within its own borders throughout this entire period. It ran the trade abroad for profit for another 7 decades after Lin Zexu's workers dissolved those 20,000 chests in the summer of 1839. The tea that set this chain of events in motion is still the most consumed beverage in Britain today. It sits in tins on kitchen shelves in London and Manchester and Glasgow, brewed every morning without ceremony. The supply chain that made Britain's tea habit possible was built on a trade that addicted, by the most conservative scholarly estimates, tens of millions of people who were given no voice in the arrangement. Lin Zexu's letter asked a question. The documents make clear the British government knew exactly what it was doing. Lin Zexu's letter had made the moral accounting visible in plain language. What has not been answered is what it means that 70 years passed between that letter and the formal end of the trade. That is the same question every generation eventually has to answer for itself. If this history of a single commodity reshaping the world at the cost of human lives troubles you, there is one more story you should hear. We have already told the story of the nutmeg that wiped out an entire people. The same machinery in a smaller island, a different European monopoly, and a death toll that still has no accurate count. Tap the nutmeg that wiped out an entire people on the end card right now and keep watching. Subscribe if this is the kind of history you want more of, and leave a comment. At what point in this story did the people in power have a clear chance to stop it, and what stopped them from taking it?